How's it going, guys? Odds and Ends RC here. Please like and subscribe. Today we're going to be fitting one of these China Jeep hard bodies onto a SCX10 chassis. I have the clone here. I've done some other videos on, but it's the same procedure as the real chassis. But obviously, you can't mount the body like this because it looks ridiculous. You know, if you're going to use the stock transmission, you're going to have to cut a huge hole in the floor. So I don't recommend using that. The rear shock towers are going to have to go to get the body to sit down low and look right. Otherwise, it'll look like it has a 10-foot body lift on it. Obviously, the wheelbase, is way shorter than the standard 313 millimeter wheelbase. I believe this Jeep body has an 11-inch wheelbase, if I remember right. One thing you'll need to make this work right is what I found I've used in the past is the SSD scale transmission. They have a metal one that's about $150, or they recently come out with a plastic one that's about $100. That's what I'll be using. Another thing you could do is there's a few kits out there that they call it a motor forward mounting kit, and it mounts your motor and transmission toward the front of the chassis, and then you'll use a transfer case in the middle. There's also that option. There's another one that's like a planetary gear drive that goes down to a simplified 10-2 transmission. You basically simplify everything on it, but you still got to do a little cutting on the body. The way I want to do it, I'm going to do the SSD scale transmission, which requires little to no cutting. That's just the best way I've found for these bodies. But I'm going to start by stripping everything down. I'm going to take all the links off, the transmission off, battery tray, just get everything out of the way. The rear shock towers, you cannot use the rear shock towers. They got to go. But give me a few minutes and we'll get everything stripped down and we'll go from there. Alright guys, I stripped the frame down, kind of simplified it a little bit. I didn't take off the front end yet, but I'm going to. I also took the front bumper off the Jeep. There's 3 screws that hold it on, comes right off. I plan on using that front bumper. I think it looks pretty good, but I mean, if you want to use an aftermarket bumper, you can easily come up with something else. But up here in front, I want the front frame to end up sitting in this notch here. It's about the exact same width as the SCX10 frame, and I want it to sit in there. To do that, I took off all the servo mounting hardware. This piece here, took that out. I will not be using that piece. It's too bulky and in the way. I have on order a different style of steering servo holder. It's just 2 little L brackets that come down on each side, and that way it's not in the way of anything up here. There's probably 50 different styles of brackets. Basically, you're looking for one that doesn't stick out further than the frame rail, but we'll get to that later. But for now, I just stuck one of these old style, the original SCX10 front bumper piece. I just put one of these in there, just a flat piece of plastic. I've got a whole box full of parts tree, axial parts tree stuff that's left over. It comes with kits and ready to run trucks and stuff like that. Most people have a box of them laying around, but use something similar to it. It's just a flat front piece. It will be sitting down, like I said, in this notch. I will be grinding off this nub a little bit. It will end up being flush with the front here. I'll be able to explain it better after I do it. But basically, the frame It's going to sit in here. And then in back, obviously the frame is too long. We will have to cut some off. And you would think the back frame would sit in this notch back here, but that's not the case. It's the frame. If you use that notch, the frame does not sit level. We'll be going down below that. In the next little segment, I'll show you that after I cut the frame rail off. But I'm going to cut off, I'm not sure yet. It's probably going to be more than 1/4 of an inch, but I'll let you know after I cut it off. Let me do that, and then we'll go from there. Alright guys, this is what I ended up with here. You see I got the frame rail sitting in that notch I was talking about earlier. I whittled off that plastic nub that was in the center, and I have a bolt going through the front plastic piece on the frame, and I use it for a locating dowel. Gotta see the front of it there. And then in the back, this is what I ended up with. This is about how low the frame sits. I cut off about 1/4 of an inch. There's 2 holes in the back of your frame rail, the stock frame rail. I ended up cutting off one of them, and that way it left me with the other one, because you need a cross brace back here to kind of stiffen up the chassis a little bit. And then here, so you can see the factory pegs, bolt hole pegs that stick down from the body. I ended up cutting about 1/4 inch off of those. I just kept whittling it down until my frame, I'm trying to go with it, the frame sitting about level with the bottom of the body. I got it pretty close, and just trying to get it parallel. You don't have to be actual same height as the bottom of the body. I'm just trying to get it to run parallel with it. So once I got it whittled down to the height I needed, I threaded these Allen bolts in there. And then if you can see, they fit perfectly in between the frame rails there. The frame rails kind of pinch under each side. And I do this for a reason. So you can take one thumb, pop it off, and that's it. That's all you got to do to take this body off. This is what I was talking about up front. And then that's the nub that I whittled off of there, and then I made the hole a little bigger. So that fits in it. And basically that's all you got to do to get the frame to mount in there, sit low, look right, and pop off in 5 seconds. Just takes a little whittling, a little time. Ain't too big of a deal. Had to whittle a little bit, if you can see, on this corner here, because the bolts on the side of the frame kind of hit that corner. So I had to do a little whittling to get that to clear. But yeah, that's the ingredients you need to be able to pop the body off in 5 seconds. The next step, I'm going to move on to shortening down the links on there to get it to fit this wheelbase. Once I get it shortened, I'll let you know what lengths you need to buy to have on hand to do this. Alright, be back in a sec. Alright guys, you can see I got my links figured out. Got the wheelbase I was looking for. It's about 11 inches. This is about the ride height I'm going to go with. I just got some shocks on there just kind of for mock-up until I figure out what height I want so I know what to order. But I'm going to end up with about 90 millimeter shocks up front and 80 millimeter shocks in the back to get the ride height I want. You know, it's going to be a scale crawler, so I'm not looking to jack it up real high or anything like that, but it'll have plenty of movement. You know, it's still got plenty of articulation front and rear, but I'll probably be going with some King Shock coilovers or something like that. Since it is a link suspension, you know, shock absorbers aren't right for it. You need coilovers for that. But yeah, get into it. Show you what I got going here. Like I said, here's the bottom. I ended up putting the 10-2 axles underneath here because there's no way I was ever going to use the clone axles. Just not up to the part. Like I said in the previous review video, this started out as a Austar or Injora chassis. And really all I got left of it is the frame rails and the skid plate itself. And that might also get changed, the skid plate, with the SSD transmission I'm putting in it. So really there's no point to, you know, if you're going to do a custom build like this, you might as well just buy the frame rails and skid plate and kind of go from there. But yeah, take this body off. I just put my thumb in here, pop it over like that, it comes right out. That's all we need to do to get the body off. That's why I like building it this way. Alright, basically what you're going to need, your links you need is on the lower front from eye to eye is about 120 millimeters. I used RC four-wheel drive medium straight links on most of the links on here. I think on the upper rears I used some axial links to achieve the length I needed. And all these links I got, these are Yeah Racing links. They're really cheap. You can get them in bundles off of eBay. But I keep a bunch on hand so I can do custom builds like this. But yeah, it's the lower links are 120 millimeter. I believe I used 80 millimeter rods. And then I use those RC four-wheel drive end links, rod ends, to achieve the 120 millimeters. The upper is a 70 millimeter rod with the RC four-wheel drive rod ends on them. But the total length on that is 115 millimeters from eye to eye. 115 millimeters. And you know, don't be afraid. Like you see I got a 3 millimeter nut in there. You know, I needed a little extra length, so I added that in there. Don't be afraid to do that because the real ones have, you know, nuts on the ends of them, lock nuts. So that kind of helps you gain, you know, a couple of millimeters if you need to cock your pumpkin up in the air a little more to get a proper drive shaft angle, or, you know, whatever. The back, I used, let's see here, 60 millimeter rods on the bottom with the RC four-wheel drive rod ends, and they are 100 millimeters from eye to eye. It's 100 millimeters even, both sides. Then the upper, I also used 60 millimeter links, but I had to use axial rod ends to get a little shorter. I needed just a little shorter on it. But the total on the upper rears are 95 millimeters from eye to eye. It's 95 millimeters in length. And I added this brace up here to kind of stiffen up the chassis. And it's a 70 millimeter brace. And the shock towers I used are them axial, it's like lift or lowering brackets you can buy to lift or lower, I believe, the original SCX10. It works perfect. The bolt holes line up perfect. You can find them all over eBay. They're $8 or $10 for a set of 4. But that's what I used for the shock towers in the back. And I had to cut off one hole. It was one hole too high. So I cut the top of them towers off to get them to fit in the wells up in there. But yeah, that worked out pretty good. Use those. And I also ended up putting a 70 millimeter link in the back here. It was a little sturdier spacer than the plastic one I had. But this is the servo bracket I ended up using. Just kind of a L bracket on either side. It didn't even have a name brand. If you just look up Axial SCX10 servo brackets and just kind of go through them until you see these. I was able to use one bolt hole on either side, which is plenty strong for what I need. And it puts the servo back far enough to clear kind of the grill up in the Jeep body. You know, you'll have to space it back a little bit. And SSD makes a servo mount that sits back about that far, but I could not find it by itself. It comes with like a link kit, and it was $50. And this thing was only $8 or $10 shipped. So I decided to go with this. But that gives me, you know, the perfect servo alignment. See my track bar and steering arm. You know, it gives me the perfect alignment for all that. But that's the key ingredients to get the right wheelbase for this body. Like I said, it'll be 90 millimeter shocks up front, and I'm going to go with 80 in the rear. And I have this solid one-piece axial rear axle in there for now. But another thing you can do to give you more shock mounting options I found is if you have the three-piece axle here with the lockouts on the end, you can also use these as shock mounts. You can use a little spacer to space it out. In the next video, we're going to be putting together this SSD scale transmission. This is the plastic one that was $100. I've used the metal one before, but it was $150, so I'm going to try this plastic one. And with the metal one, I didn't have to do much trimming on the bottom of the body. I'm hoping this will be the same. You know, if it's a hair bigger, I might have to trim a little bit, but as long as I don't get into the interior, I'll be happy. But we're going to be putting that on, which it comes with the skid plate. I don't know if I'll need to use that or not. And I'll be putting this Holmes Hobby Crawlmaster Sport motor on there. I'm going to try a 20 turn. That's something I had laying around. But yeah, next video we'll get that mount put together and mounted in there, and I'll show you what you got to cut, or if you got to cut everything to get it up in there. But hope I didn't lose anybody. If you like, please subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. It'll help me out. And we'll catch you on the next video. Thanks.